else want to share before I get to like questions and our discussion? I like to hear how y'all are doing.
My nonprofit got a $26,000 donation, which
Nice.
we're a really small nonprofit, so that was a big deal for
That's
us,
a
and it's
huge
uh,
deal.
yeah, and it's from this group called 100 Women Who Care,
Hmm.
and they have chapters all over the country and maybe the world, but it's just this group of 100 women who get together and vote on a nonprofit and then all donate $100, and our group is actually 250 women who care, but it was a cool way to see the community come together.
Yeah, congratulations. We have one in Dayton too, and they contributed uh it was somewhere around that, like 25,000 to our school foundation. So congrats, that's a big gift.
Yes.
So I just wanted to check in on your lab assignments and how they're going. And I can stay on afterwards to answer any specific questions or issues that you're having. But um, Grace has interviewed her person. How is that going for everybody else? Everybody on track? General questions?
Yeah, so I interviewed my person. She sent me, well, I sent her the questions, and because she was really busy, there's like a 9 hour time difference between us. Um, she sent back voice recordings of her
Nice.
responses. I know, Facebook Messenger, it's so helpful. So she just sent back the voice recordings of her answers, and then sent me like some links to reference as far as other programs she's done as well. And that was actually pretty helpful. I do have a question though, how to format the answers from the interview, because I noticed it said it should be taken directly from our notes. Do we like put it into like a paragraph format? I just put like, this is the question, this is the response, and just like
Yeah,
paste, just
exactly
basically
that.
transcribe the conversation and that's it.
Yep. So for that one section, yeah, you'll write the questions that you ask them and their response. So if it's a direct transcription, great. If it's bullet points from your notes, great. If you did it like in person over the phone, over Zoom. So either is fine if it's direct transcription or just bullet points or paragraph. That part's fairly flexible as long as the content of their answer is part of that section after each question.
Okay, gotcha. That makes it a lot easier rather than when I asked them this, they responded saying that,
Yeah, no,
and then just like long quotation marks.
yeah,
Uh,
no.
okay,
It doesn't
that
have to be like in a narrative of, like their tone was this, or yeah, you don't need to do that, just the content. If you have
okay,
any interesting observations, by all means, feel free to put that in there, but that is not required. So if it adds to the context or helps maybe explain some things, by all means put it in there, but really just the question and answer.
okay, that makes it a lot easier. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And hopefully I'm sure that's helpful for at least one other person. Um, any other general questions? And again, I can stay on after if you're having specific issues that you want to address separate from the group. All right, so I want to jump into our discussion questions. And again, and I'll put them in the chat one more time. I think everybody should be seeing them. And if you haven't gotten a chance to read the book chapter yet, that is totally fine as well, because it is a little bit lengthier, and it was the best scan I could possibly get. So I know there's a little bit of blurriness, but it's a really great book. And that chapter just provides a general overview of leadership and change. So, so I pulled out some of the generic questions and one around seed scale. And so also want to encourage folks that may have connection issues or are unable to come off of mute. By all means, please engage in the chat box so that everybody can, participates, and want to make sure that everybody is heard since we only have an hour together. So in that first question, if you want to give us a specific example or share with us how you've used leadership for change, if there was a specific example from your volunteer work, from your employment, whether that's relatively recent or in the past, that you can share with us. I'd be curious about how you've used your leadership to make change. Even, you know, it doesn't have to be monumental, but even procedure change, policy change, how people work together, how someone saw someone else as part of the team.
Good evening from Bhutan.
Hey, Dorji.
Yeah, I've been to a tour towards the central part of Bhutan, and I've just come back yesterday, and we have had a project in central Bhutan. It's a water project, and the project is about a water supply in a old age home, where it's headed by a nun who was actually the in charge of the temple, the monastery there, and then she has around all kinds of people there. Maybe you call it old age home, but they are old people. They are also younger people with you know, physically challenged people, and also destitutes. You know, all kinds of people there. So together they have around 50 or more people there in the monastery. So to relate it to the leadership role that we are playing there is we try to actually not. Actually, we had a small grant from the Bhutan Foundation, where actually we have actually written a proposal to supply, you know, to support our water supply for that monastery. And we actually, what we tried to do there was, actually I happen to be the country coordinator for the Bhutan Water Partnership. So I just went there. I just didn't say we have that money and you should do this work. So I didn't say that. We actually went there and we have actually discussed with the people there, whether they are physically challenged or they are old or young, or but we had a consultative meeting there, and then we wanted them to actually tell us what they want. And also the process of executing the work there, it all came from them. So they actually wanted to execute the work themselves, actually. And that's how we try to change the leadership, not actually imposing what we know about water supply, but actually listening to their grievances, listening to their ideas. And so we have actually had a long note of the concerns from the people there, and so that's what we are going to do. We are actually going to execute the project according to their ideas, their the expectations. I think we will look after that. That's what we have done. Thank you.
Sounds like exciting work, and very much in the, I think, mindset of seed scale, of rather than us coming in and telling people what they should do, getting their perspective from a local community, what's feasible, what the issue really is. Sounds like an awesome project and awesome work. So who else wants to share their role in terms of how they have led change? Used your leadership to make change.
Erika.
Hey, Herman.
Profe. According to my experience, a leader one leader should work in a rural area or urban area, which is a different strategy to work as a leader. For example, about 15 or I think 15 years ago, I was working in rural area, and I understand in rural area the leader uh, should speak community language. In this case, for example, um, we call it Aymara or Quechua, which is the
Mhm.
local language. And if you don't speak in such a kind of language, it's very difficult to convince the people. And also the leader should know the village customs. For example, sometimes, especially on the weekend, he or she must drink alcohol. If you don't smoke or don't drink, you don't have uh, credible words. But nowadays, I am working in urban area. In urban area, that such kind of customs there is no. But mm, in my city nowadays, the political how do you say, you must be supported by politics. If
Mm.
you don't work with politics, it's very difficult to have some money in order to develop your community. This is my experience. That's it.
So it sounds like with the rural and the customs that you mentioned, you um, what comes to my mind at first is you play along, you participate, you join in to be accepted, to try and make change. And I think it goes back to our conversation last week too, when we've talked about the difference between rural and urban and the expectations and the different issues, and that we do play along to have to find a result, right? We visit with people, we sit with people, we do what is expected to be part of the group to assist. And that, I mean, do you all consider that leadership when you participate to be considered part of the group to help make change? Do you consider that leadership? For some of you, I bet the answer is no, and some of you it's yes.
I'm going to say it really depends on your goal and how you can get there. Sometimes if the expectation, I'm thinking about my context, if the expectation is that you just play along, but I know, or I think I know that I can do it without playing along, then sometimes that can work. But I could see, really it's situational. I really would say it's situational. And yeah, you just got to, and I think really a key part of like leadership is judgment, where you're able to say like, and like being able to envision the outcome, like predict. And I know like we can't always predict everything, but like thinking, okay, this is going to be the consequence, or like this could lead to this, a cause and effect. So I don't know. I'd say it depends.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
For me, it's not so much about playing along, but how you can build those relationships. Because I think a lot of what could be considered playing along is about building trust and rapport.
Mhm.
And I think you can do that in a lot of different ways. And I think it's important to try and find a way that feels authentic to you.
Well, I think you bring up a great point in mentioning authenticity. And And where do we draw that line to say how much of myself am I willing to be unauthentic for the goal? And for some of us, I think there is no budge, there is no wiggle room on, say, values and morals um, and your goals, where other people are like, I'll give up a little piece of myself if the greater community's need is bigger than myself. And I know if I maybe compromise just a tad of my authenticity, there's more benefit versus if I don't budge. But there's nothing wrong with either way. I don't think. You, like Grace mentioned, it depends on the situation. You budge when you got to budge. You hold when you are firm in one thing. Like that's, I'm not going to do, I'm not going to budge. I'm not going to be unauthentic in how I approach a situation.
So I actually kind of, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I kind of want to name drop the reading that we had to do, the social change model with the 7 C's. That kind of goes under group values with like controversy with civility. So like you may not entirely agree with what's going on, but like you still want to contribute to the community, and it's like these, like those are the community values, and so like because they're the community values that's like shared amongst everybody, you still like participate regardless of like maybe that's not something you entirely agree on, but like for the good of the community, you go along with the community to like stay within it so that you don't like, I guess, like pull things apart type of thing. I don't know. There is some, I guess, some sort of sacrifice, but at the same time, it's like for the good of the community, there's like the, I don't know, keeping it all together, I guess. I don't know. That's just kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah, because we don't want to be the person that's divisive.
Yes,
that points out the
harmony.
differences.
That's what I was thinking of, harmony.
There we go. Maintain
harmony.
harmony.
The word harmony. I don't know why.
No, I think that's a good word to kind of describe what we want to happen, what we want to maintain while creating change for good, right? And doing what we can to shepherd change, but again, change that is seen from the community level, not necessarily us coming in and defining what that change is. So let's shift from that. I want to know what you see after being involved in your local communities, whether that's like one day or your entire life. What is the biggest need that you see as a community member? So not from a leadership perspective or not from a project perspective, but as a member of your community, the biggest need that you see for change and why? And if you've already started to work on that issue, you know, how have you used leadership within that?
This has been a fun one for me to kind of think about in my daily work with youth, because I think after being a product myself and then going back into the education system and seeing that not a whole lot has changed as far as like delivery goes, and I think that the teaching of young people, I think that's a big focus for me of empowering and giving them voice. And I think this like ageism is very much a thing, and discrediting anything that a youth thinks from like from an adult's perspective of like, I'm teaching you and this is the way that it is. And then it's, I don't know, I think about it and it's no wonder why like youth grow up, or any of us grow up with like all of these challenges is in not knowing exactly how to handle situations because we've been taught one way. and it hasn't been like a collaboration of learning, really. So I think for me in my daily work, I've put forth an effort of like creating a student council that is trying to, there's still plenty of work to do with it, and it's very much in the early stages, but getting them together to then plan program, plan events, plan what we deliver in class. Because I think time and time again we get like what we're learning is boring or this doesn't matter. And I think I agree with them. And it's not just say that like math isn't important, but I haven't done anything with math since I was in grade school. So I don't know. That's just some of my thoughts at the moment.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting with empowering youth, and I think that's probably a critical need for a lot of you. A lot of folks are uncomfortable with giving choice to youth and saying, okay, well, you can choose this or you can choose this. Which would you all like to do? As opposed to saying to kids, this is what you're going to do, to learn or to participate in a group. And that starts really early in not allowing for choice, and saying this is what works for everybody rather than addressing individual needs or wants. So I think the concept of empowering kids to choose their own things and to think outside of one way, because when you, maybe I'm seeing it differently, but it seems like whenever we limit to one way, we're reducing the ability to think critically, and we're giving them the solution without saying, okay, here's the problem. What do you all think should be the solution?
Yeah, I really see it as like stunting the future growth of, I don't know, it seems to be, from what I've seen directly, of like pretty anxiety inducing when a choice is thrown out, and it's like it's just kind of at a loss of how to even process how to make a choice.
And Daniel mentions in his target community working with farmer groups and cooperatives in seed production and market function, self-governed, and Daniel promotes leadership by example. And his role is facilitating and in an advisory capacity to enhance seed business efficiencies and management areas. Sounds exciting. What other needs are you all seeing in your local community where change is needed, and kind of maybe share your role in that community?
From my perspective, my case, if I am out of the leader position, but as a member, what I think most important thing is, firstly, what's the meaning of change? I mean, if something, what I say, the concept of a change meaning, I think that's one of the first things that make me move. And second is that change or goal. What's benefit? What's motivate? Do I have motivation? That is a motivation, and the change is consistency. That if I agree that thought, then that can make me move. Otherwise, good strategy and the other the element doesn't make sense to me before I agree that two things.
I think you bring up an important point, that if I am not, if I'm motivated by the situation, if I'm motivated by the goal, I'm more willing to participate and use my leadership or my influence or my resources or my network to make change if I'm motivated by the goal. Casey, you got something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm using a different mic this morning. So I work in economic development, and the biggest need that I see is that the first thing when people think of economic development is industrial development. And industrial development is a very big sector in South Central Kentucky. And so we get all the time when we're doing planning and things like that, well, we want, this is the pie in the sky. We want the Toyota. We want the large manufacturing that's going to bring in hundreds of jobs and all kinds of investment into the community. And that's good and all, but some of our communities that we are working with do not have the infrastructure to host these large manufacturers. So when we go into these communities, we try to work with those communities in saying, okay, you want this, the pie in the sky. Let's talk about how we get there. Is your roads good? Do you all have enough daycares? Do you all have adequate housing for these people? And it gets them thinking, oh, you know what? Actually, we don't. How do we get there? You know, now Toyota may be available 20, 25, 30 years down the road, but probably not right now. So that's how we get to use our influences, not saying just flat out no, that you're not going to get there, because nobody wants to hear no. Nobody wants to hear that. So we say, okay, if you want to get there, let's look at the pathways that we can get you there eventually. But you also mentioned, so I have been through the seed scale courses. I think with that, we had to work with a lot of our local leaders that have that mindset of industrial development, rather than saying other avenues that we can work on. Even our, a lot of the bottom up community members also agree that we don't have the infrastructure to do these things. However, there's other ways we can get to that point. Trying to answer all your questions here. Is it easy to apply leadership contacts? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the second question. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
But
No,
that
if
would
you
be
have,
my answer.
yeah, industrial versus, you know, other mechanisms is really hard. When you don't have, I mean, whenever the Toyota plant went into Georgetown, Kentucky, Georgetown's not that big of a place. And when you're talking about a plant that employs like 20,000 people or something like that, that's a lot of people for one local community. And then when you're talking about their kids, you're talking about spouses and partners, you know, that's a significant change, and it completely changed Georgetown. Georgetown was this tiny little blip before Toyota came in the 80s, and definitely changed the landscape of not just Georgetown, but Central Kentucky in general. I mean, a lot of folks live in Lexington and work in Toyota. And I know, sorry for folks, that geography probably means nothing. Georgetown's outside of my hometown in Lexington, and it made a huge impact. Was it necessarily the biggest or best solution for lack of employment? Not sure. I was just a kid, but what I was going to share, oh shoot. Anyway, anybody else want to share what I was trying to think of, an example that it fell flat on its face, and now I'm trying to remember what it was. I'll share a positive one though, is like seeing a need, you know, going back to Kentucky, and in Lexington, this was about 10, 15 years ago. The three largest employers in the city, so the university, the city itself, and then hospital networks, decided that they were no longer going to employ, I think I've shared this example with like Casey and Matt, they were no longer going to employ anyone with a criminal background, like criminal history. So specifically like felonies. The university had an employee that embezzled, stole computer equipment. And after that one bad experience, they no longer were going to hire anybody with a felony. Well, the problem is with substance use in central Kentucky, but in rural areas in Appalachia that are served by central Kentucky, most of the women that we were serving in substance use treatment had felonies. If you have an addiction, you are more likely to commit crime, whether that's stealing, that's dealing, that's anything illegal for supporting an addiction. You run a very, very high risk of being arrested and having a criminal history, which then when you try to move past an addiction and not only become sober, but regain a life, you can't do that very well with a criminal history and get employment beyond, say, in the US, like $8 an hour, which is not a living wage, right? So the solution to that was some sort of employment of these women who have criminal backgrounds. And since there wasn't any, a friend of mine and I created employment for those women. So a situation where we said, well, we have access to a kitchen, so it's a resource. We have access to expertise, the people that have run catering businesses before. So we know that the field is a little crammed with other companies that provide box lunches and catering and things like that. But if we offer a different solution, like a feel good, if you buy from us, you are helping women re-enter this world with grace and dignity and employment that supports them. Let's do it. Let's make this happen. And for 3 years, we did that. We hired and employed 30 women at 30 hours. So they couldn't work a full-time job for a variety of reasons, but needed more than, say, 20 hours or just part-time. So 30 hours, 30 women over those 3 years. And it worked really well. We saw the need. We looked at our resources. We looked at how we could make this work. And on the employee side, that's a lot of tough love. I mean, it was staying on top of people, making sure that for them to show up for a shift, people need transportation, people need other resources to get them where they are. Whereas now I remember the example that falls flat on its face, in that I'm working with an organization that is trying to empower women who have, and specifically women, but there are other survivors of domestic violence, but in particular women, where we're trying to empower them to, and help them in any way possible achieve what their goal is. So if that is getting into a new apartment, if that is buying a car, if that is getting their kids back after a stressful and dangerous situation, great. And so sometimes that requires just sometimes giving them a grant. It's not a loan, just flat out giving an individual, $200 to pay a deposit on an apartment. And so it's more of an empowerment piece. It's not necessarily financial literacy, right? But yet all the banks that want to support survivors think that they should all learn how to budget and balance a checkbook. Well, when you don't have any money, it doesn't matter how much money or how you know how to balance a checkbook. You can't budget when your basic needs aren't met. And so we're kind of trying to balance this, well, we know what the true need is. We work in the need every day. And yet the bank's solution to that is that these women learn how to balance a checkbook and save. And it's not a sustainable solution. It's paternalistic. It's many things in there. So it's interesting, the difference of viewing needs for what they really are and trying to address them at a base level, rather than saying, well, this is the solution we think is best because it looks good to them, unfortunately. Well, yeah, so it's maddening. So thanks for sharing, Ivy here and Herman. And sometimes change, we all know change is not the easiest thing, But if we're able to empower and enthusiastically bring people along and show them that, yes, this can work, or here's other examples where this has worked. I think as part of all the things that encompass leadership, empathy for trying to understand reluctance to change can be just as important. Let's see. And our kind of final questions, has it been hard or easy to apply leadership in your situations? When we talk about local context, what challenges have you run into? What has been the most frustrating thing? Even if you haven't come up with a solution to address it, maybe someone else does here. What has been hard, or maybe you've been pleasantly surprised at how easy something has been?
I think something I wanted to share, it kind of goes off this question and the last one, is that with the seed scale, I feel like it's tried to shift our focus from like what needs to be happening. It's like, oh, don't look at your needs, just look at what you're doing well. And so it's really hard to then think like there's all these problems, but we're supposed to be working on like one solution. So I think that's been difficult for me and my community, been a challenge.
Is there like a specific example of that? Or other folks wanting to share what's been really hard, what's been easy?
Going off what Grace has just mentioned, that with our communities, they've always for decades have done either some type of SWOT analysis or some type of needs assessment. And they're so used to that when we introduce this idea of, instead of going that route, let's talk about your community's successes, your community's strength. And they're kind of taken back, as in, that seems so silly to do. But when we actually break it down and explain it why we do that, it kind of brings up you can see the aha moment that they have, like, well, that makes sense, you know? So I totally get Grace's point, because that happens to us all the time.
Yeah, I noticed that too, with my village that I lived in. I remember asking like, hey, so what is it that you guys are really successful at? Because it was an agricultural community, and the answer was like, oh, school, because school was kind of like a community center, and it was the one school in my village. And they're like, well, we're good with the school because the school will have like, they'll have people come over and like view the school, and they had like the school's featured on like so many like news reports and stories, and there's like a lot of clout around the school. And they would also like grow vegetables and sell them. They would also grow the vegetables and eat them at the school too. Like the children would be involved in the harvesting of the items and then like prepare them in the school to eat. And so like they already had that. And I'm like, okay, well that's amazing. Like that's really cool. Like, do you want to build upon that? And they're like, actually, we need our road because there was like one road in the village entirely. The rest was like dirt. So I remember the first thing I would ask when I got there, like, oh, so what are some things you guys want to improve? And they're like, we want a road. And I'm like, cool, but like, how do we, is that really feasible? Like the first thing you think is we want a road built. Like who's in charge of like building a road? And they're like, well, the government is. And I'm like, yeah, so let's look at the community itself. Like let's focus on just like what are we doing good that we can expand upon. But like sometimes the people can be really targeted on one thing, outside of what they already have that they're doing successfully.
Like tunnel vision.
Yeah, something like that. And then they're like, well, the American can do it. Like, no, that's your government. You're That's a you guys talk to your government thing. That's not the get the American to do it. That's I'm so sorry. I can't get a road built in this village, but I can help add more like business classes and like developing that for the farmers that are already involved in the village. And they're like, yeah, but the road though.
Well, and Gunjan mentioned that her major challenge is working with local leaders and including them to work on a leadership committee or your in seed scale our local oh shoot.
Coordinating committee.
Thank you. Coordinating committee, especially for those leaders that may be designated, like we talked about last week, designated leaders. I think sometimes have a little, if you want to call it issue, I think they have a little harder time participating on those coordinating committees and giving up a little bit of their leadership or their sway, however you want to kind of couch that. But like, well, if I participate in this and I agree to do something different than either what was promised in a campaign or even worse to some people, someone knows how to do it better, or someone has access or a relationship to something that would fix this issue and I don't. So ego getting in the way of making progress. And Daniel mentioned managing conflict of interest is one of the key challenges to that leadership. As an extension kind of question to this though, is why do we think it's harder for communities to think about what they're already doing well and what's a strength when you ask them, as opposed to, like Casey mentioned, they automatically go to a SWOT analysis or a needs assessment? Why is it hard to focus on what's going well?
I think we all already have these lists in our mind where we're like, these are what we want to happen. And so like, it's so hard because my community is like, we've completely shifted our focus. Like we had all these goals of like things that really need to be worked on. And so then it's like, what are you doing well? And it's like, okay, well, we're doing this well. So then we shift our focus to start building that. But like, that's important and it's going to be like accomplishable. But there's all these, like, it's just like so incredibly frustrating that like we've shifted our focus to like work on this one like education project, which is really important. But there's like so many more like pressing issues that like maybe are out of our reach. Like maybe it's harder for us to focus on them, but they're like, I feel like way heavier. Like, yeah, like you're saying, like infrastructure, like garbage, like all of these things like we don't have in place where it's like those are important, like those are, I don't know, it's hard to look at something and say like that's more important, but it's like
right.
More
well, yeah, systems change versus single issue.
Yeah.
And Grace, trying to go with your point too, even when we think personally, if we put this idea of the seed scale method personally, the first things that a lot of us can think of are the things that we can't do or things we want to do and just don't have that ability. So I think when we put that on a community level, it's, well, it's hard to imagine, to think personally what I've done successfully or things that I know I'm really good at. It's just hard to get that mentality shift to focus on things that I'm personally good at compared to things that I'm not good at or things I've failed at.
Yeah, Casey, I agree entirely. Actually, I was kind of thinking something similar. Like when you think about developing, like, I feel like it's definitely like a very human reaction. Like when you're talking about like developing yourself, like the first thing you think of is, oh my gosh, I do this badly or I do this poorly, rather than thinking like, I'm really good at crocheting and I can make an amazing like dinner, like I can cook very well, and like look at those as your talents that you can like build upon, rather than like you kind of like instead of viewing those like positive things you think of like, okay, what are the things that like the negative things that need to be fixed? So I feel like we tend like we have a hard time with that like ourselves, and so it's like really hard to like apply that to a whole community of people who may actually have that same similar thought process as well.
Mhm.
I also think that when we're at the community level and someone like a Peace Corps volunteer comes in, or someone like an economic development committee comes in, the community's response might be, yeah, I'm already good at this. I need help with something else. You can fix, or you can fill the gap, or you can do this thing that we're struggling with. And I think looking for an outsider to fix the problem instead of yeah.
When you know who the like relationship should be with, or like the community does, and then expect you to come in and with a magic wand fix the issue when it just needs to be a relationship developed. Similar to what Amir has said of handing over responsibility, transitioning leadership makes it incredibly difficult, especially when you've had successes for so long under one leader, and for whatever reason need to shift to a new leader. People get very anxious. People get very untrusting of different parties, and like Fabienne has mentioned here, mistrust can come out of that. But what's interesting is like the people are intimidated and scared by building upon what they are good at, because they don't think it's good enough, or it's not the right skill. But when we look at folks that have built on what they know how to do well, the success comes gradually. Three-way partnership, right? So the bottom up, top down, and outside in partnerships. And government's one thing. I think we all struggle with mistrust at different levels of government. But mistrust of NGOs. I have a hard time with that one. I don't know if anybody else does. But what are the situations then? I'm kind of curious from your all's context and situations, what leads to mistrust of NGOs in your communities?
That's like it's like they come with all the ideas, like they come with the solutions. It's and that like one thing that is that works in Haiti is like when people come to learn, listen to the community. And when NGOs come with their own ideas, that is like they have a lot of money, they want to spend it, and that is the good area that they can spend it. But they are not very they are not very interesting in what gonna be the sustainable impact. I don't know if I explain it well, but what could be very good is like what I learned while I'm working with people in Haiti. When you come to them, you listen to them, you look at the solution with them, that can be more successful. And I think that the great thing that could be in a partnership, it's like when you try to learn from me, and I do the same. And in Haiti, we have they call Haiti the Republic of NGOs. A lot of money spent every year in Haiti, but the problem remains, because right now we are in front of the good crisis, and I think that is the NGO is part of it. And I think when I come with the seed scale process, in one of the discussion that we had, they say that if we want to do something good, if we want to change the way that we used to work, we have to forget NGOs, we have to forget government. We have to try to do it on our own. That is, yeah.
Which is interesting that, yeah, if you want change, you have to do it on your own. You can't rely on other people or organizations. Anybody else in that kind of same situation? Thank you, Dan. Yeah, some NGOs have a hidden agenda, like prioritizing their own political or economical interest. It's about the money, right? Folks see that as sometimes the only resource is money. Yeah, short-term solutions without thinking about long-term impact. Absolutely. Let's put a Band-Aid on something.
Yeah, I noticed that money was also a big topic. Like every time I mentioned, like, so what are some things that we have here as a resource? They would be like, well, we don't have resources. Like you have this giant school that like organizations are like pouring money and resources and like tutors into, but like your first thought is, well, we don't have money, but you guys have like all this talent, you guys have all these individuals who are very motivated, but money seems to be a big thing that everyone thinks makes the world go round, which in some cases I understand, yes, but at the same time, like it's still a resource in its own right, just as individuals are a resource as well.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most frustrating parts of private funding, at least in the US, but I know globally too, is that some private funders will get so focused on an issue that they usually don't understand and then restrict their funding to an issue that they don't understand and only for specific things. The one thing that will drive, and I'm sure I'm not the only person here, you can hands up or high five or yep, that's it. When they're like, well, you can't use this for operating. You can't pay staff. We'll give you all the money for the vaccines you need. We'll give you all the money for the meals you need to serve, but we're not going to pay for staff. I'm like, who do you think's doing the work? Who, like, how is this going to get done? Like, yes, we have volunteers and yes, we have community members that are part of the work, but we can't do that. We can't distribute vaccines. We can't distribute food if the lights don't work and there aren't people and we're not offering enough of a salary. Like the first time I ever had to hire a social worker, they were right out of a master's degree program, and this is like more than 10 years ago. But the most I could offer them was $28,000 a year. And I cried. I'm like, I can't give you any more money, and you deserve at least twice this. But I'm restricted by budgets and funding because we're only able to. So it's very much a catch-22, especially when we talk about the money issue. Gunjan shared an example here, the NGO that she worked for before it got funding for working with elderly. Even so, working was on elderly healthcare, but the people mentioned the major problem for the community was the spread of communicable diseases. Even on my drive down here, there was a long story about needle exchange programs, and they're like, well, that's not really a problem. And then what happens? They have a massive explosion of HIV and other transmittable diseases that could easily be a non-issue if people had access to what's needed. And so most people were putting then a judgment on, well, it's a negative behavior that they shouldn't be doing anyway, so we're perpetuating it. Like, yeah. So I hear you all. I hear you. That yes, people are valuable resources. We should focus on strengths. You all have brought up some great issues here, that we have to build trust, that we have to understand context, the expectations, listen, depending on our goal, playing the game, if you will, going along with expectations and trying to build trust, being authentic, and really reckoning the difference between single issue solutions and systems change. So I hope, if you haven't had a chance to read the chapter yet, please do so. I hope you enjoy it. If you would like to make comments in the forum, it's not required, but by all means, please share if you'd like to. If there's a key takeaway for you, I welcome you to share that. And we'll be back here next week. Lab number 2, I'll have out by tomorrow. I was making some adjustments. It's very much based on like leadership assessments. And so I will put this in the document too, but I very much want to recognize that most of these assessments are from an American perspective and American based, and are not as culturally diverse as they should be. But maybe we'll come up with our own assessments from this conversation. So I do want to recognize that, but that'll be posted this week as well. So looking forward to seeing you all next week and hearing more about your experiences with leadership. Thanks, everybody.
Have
Are
a good
Gecko
week,
Labs
guys.
due Saturday? Is that by the end of
It
this?
is due on the 14th.
Okay.
Just a second, I can, let's see, sorry, the 13th, looks like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. By end of day on
Yep.
East Coast?
Let me double check what's in Moodle here. I think it's usually 11:59 Eastern.
Cool.
Yep.
Right. Hope you have a good day.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fabian.
I actually have one last question.
Sure.
So from transcribing the interview, do we make any grammatical errors, or just whatever they said, that's what I'm writing down?
Grammar, I wouldn't worry too much about when they say like it was. I don't know if you want to give me an example, but I would not worry too much about the grammar. Regardless if it's from your notes or from like a direct transcription. Yeah, that one is what it is. Now, all of that to say, if you corrected it, I would not be the wiser. So if it drives you absolutely nuts, but it is, they're, I say y'all all the time, and some people might trans that as Y apostrophe ALL, and some people will be like, you all. So if it helps with the context to leave it, you can. I will leave that judgment up to you. In other words, also, if you were worried about, like, say, grade because of the grammar of the person you interviewed, that's a non-issue.
Okay, gotcha. Because her first language is not English, so she, I don't know, she said a couple things like she's talking about her community, and she said everyone from, and she said the word youngsters, which is quite interesting. And I wonder where she picked that up from. Youngsters to olders.
Yeah.
Because like I know the word in Armenian means olders, but like she just kind of translated it into English being olders. So like little things like that. Would it?
Yeah.
Should I just? I'm okay leaving it. I just wasn't sure entirely how it was all going to be formatted.
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter, then I would like to just keep her words as they are, because
Yeah,
they're her words, and I don't want.
Yeah, it doesn't affect your grade at all of the grammar that they use, especially English as a second language.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That was it. Thank you again. I
All right.
appreciate your responses.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Have a good weekend. And please, I hope you feel better. Get some fresh air.
Yeah. Oh, I did. As soon as I walked out, I was like, yeah, I feel much better. but didn't even think about the gas. I literally thought I had altitude sickness.
Okay, gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
have a good one then.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.